So simplifying rationals with I in the denominator, rationalizing a denominator. And this is Helpful Notes 5.7. Helpful Note 5.7. Okay, and so hopefully you already were able to do this first few here. When we had, remember back in the day when we had square roots on the bottom, we would multiply the top and bottom by the same square root. So if you multiply that bottom by the square root of 3, and you multiply the top by the square root of 3, you end up with, I was pausing, sorry, 2 square roots of 3 over 3 is the final answer. So that we already knew, or we already learned before. So square root of 7, same thing. If you multiply the bottom by square root of 7 and the top by square root of 7, we get just merely 7 on the bottom. And 5, negative 5 multiplied with, what's the square root of 2 times the square root of 7? Square root of 2 times 7 is 14, I believe. So you have the square root of 14, negative 5 square root of 14 over 7. You can't cancel the 7 with the square root of 14. You can't factor the square root of 14, nothing comes out. And can't simplify the 5, negative 5 with the 7. We're done. Now when it has a binomial in the bottom, you might remember that we treat that as a binomial, and we still want to multiply the top and the bottom. Now if we had more space here, we should really copy over the original fraction before we continue. But I'm just going to kind of give you guys that. Let me do the eraser thing. I hate to say that's equal when it's not. Okay. If we multiply the top and the bottom by something that will cancel, do you guys remember this? Square root of 3. The only difference is opposite sign to this original sign here. Okay? Everything else stays the same. And we're just multiplying that fraction by 1, so you know that the identity property says that we'll end up with something that's equal to the original fraction. Because 1 is square root of 3 plus 1 over square root of 3 plus 1, that's 1. Now, on top, when it's square root, I'd prefer you do not, and so will your pre-cal teacher, do not distribute that as a rule. Okay, leave the 2 out front. And on bottom, square root of 3 times square root of 3 is 3. We just FOIL those out. We're multiplying. The first times the first. Square root of 3 times positive 1 is the outside. The inside is square root of 3 times negative 1. Make sure you understand that. And the last two would be negative 1 times positive 1, which is negative 1. You may have already guessed what happens to plus 1 of something and minus 1 of the same thing. They divide out, or I'm sorry, they add out. What's left on the bottom? 3 minus 1, which is 2. What's left on the top? 2 square root of 3 plus 1. Why did I leave the 2 out front? Because now those factors divide out. We had 2 factors on top. Okay, we had the 2 and the parenthesis. And that 2 divides out. 2 over 2 is 1. So the answer is square root of 3 plus 1. Okay? And let's go ahead and see if we can do that last one from the top of your notes there. 5, I'm going to say multiplied. I'm going to say multiplied by parenthesis, 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 parenthesis. What's the 2? What do I do with the sign? Minus square root of 6. And on top, 2 minus square root of 6. Okay? We multiply, and on top, we don't even bother, just write it down. 5, parenthesis, 2 minus square root of 6. And on the bottom, the denominator, FOIL that together, and if you know your FOIL, if you remember your Algebra 1, and early on in this class, 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times negative square root of 6. 2 times positive square root of 6. And last one, positive square root of 6 times negative square root of 6 is negative 6. I'm going to go down for the next part here because I don't think we have space, or I'll just erase this over here. Okay, so making space for that. On the top I have the 5. What do I get on the bottom? 4. Those cancel away. Opposite signs, right? Negative 2, positive 2. 4 minus 6 is negative 2. Right? Negative 2. And on top I have a 5. And that parenthesis. 2 minus square root of 6. I believe my fraction looks like that. And I can't simplify just the 2's because that 2 is not a factor. It's sort of married with the square root of 6 here. Right? It's sort of put together with that square root of 6 because it has a minus sign there. It's not a factor. We can't cancel the 2's. Okay. There it is. We can't simplify 5 over negative 2. So we're done. Parenthesis, 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 parenthesis. So what am I multiplying by here? If I have a binomial, I'm multiplying by the opposite sign than this. So it's going to be a 1 minus square root of 3. 1 minus square root of 3. This one is going to be a 1 plus, I'm kind of doing 2 problems at once here. Square root of 3. 1 plus square root of 3. Let's just do the top one first. Look at your notes, make sure you get the right problem. I think the top one's the one on the left. Alright, so opposite signs, so we need to be able to FOIL the top and the bottom on this one, okay? Because we've got 2 on top and 2 on bottom. So on the bottom, we know that the square root is supposed to cancel away if we do this right. 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times positive square root of 3 should cancel with negative square root of 3 times 1. Make sure in your mind or on your paper that they do. What's the only other term that you should get would be the last 2. Because of the opposite signs here. Because of the plus and minus sign. So the last one is square root of 3. Negative square root of 3 times positive square root of 3 is negative square root of 3 times square root of 3 is 3. That's from the 2 square roots of 3 multiplied together. Alright, and on top, 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times square root of 3. Does the outside cancel with the inside on this one? They're both positive signs, aren't they? So they both have, we have 1 and 1 more of those square roots of 3, so we have 2 square roots of 3. And the last one, 3 times square root of 3 times square root of 3 is 3. Okay? And we do need to be able to simplify. On top, I think I end up with the 1 plus 3 goes together. Is that right? So I get 4 plus, and the 2 square root, do I have space, of 3. 2 squared of 3. So that's a 4. And 2 squared of 3. And on the bottom, I've got a 1 minus 3, which is negative 2. Okay, we can continue to simplify this one. So I want to talk about what we can do to keep going. I'll do it in red. Since the 4 can't be simplified, just the 4 and the 2, we can't do that. The 4 and the 2 on the bottom, we can't simplify just those two numbers. But what we can do is we can simplify all 3 of them. It's sort of like factoring a 2 out of the top. I would like you to go ahead and show that step. Factor a 2 out of the numerator. Back in our old days, factoring a 2 out of this on top gives you, dividing a 2 out, 2. Now how would you get a 4 there? I think it's a 2 left over inside, plus 1 square root of 3. And on the bottom, I still have that negative 2. And now I can divide them out. I've got a negative still there on the bottom. I would like you to put that negative sort of, it goes like this. Negative 2 plus square root of 3. If you want to just divide that negative in, you can, which would change the signs and make it a negative 2 minus square root of 3. In fact, that's the best way to write your answer right there. I imagine there are questions on this, so ask me, I'll stop the video. Next is going to be the last one. So, last one, we'll do green. Green. Okay. So we have the bottom. We know that the square root should cancel away. We should just end up with the first times the first, 1 times 1, and the last times the last, which is going to be negative 3. Double check that you understand that's what that is. And on top, they probably won't cancel away. Let's check it out. 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times negative square root of 3 is. And on the inside, 1 times negative square root of 3 still is another negative square root of 3. And the last ones are negative square root of 3 and times another negative square root of 3 is, sorry about that, negative square root of 3 times another negative square root of 3 is positive 3. So you end up not canceling that top. You end up keeping negative 1 take away 3 on bottom is negative 2. Is that right? And on the top, that was the 1 take away 3. And on top you have a 1 and a 3, which is 4. And what else on top? Negative square root of 3 and another negative square root of 3 is negative 2 square root of 3. That's what's on top. And you could still, like we did on the last problem, you could factor the top, or most of you do better with just dividing negative 2 into both those numbers. Negative 2 goes into 4. Negative 2 goes into 4. And negative 2 goes into negative 2. So negative 2 goes into 4, I think, negative 2. And negative 2 goes into negative 2, I think, once. Positive 1. You don't even have to write the 1 if you don't want to. Okay? That's that one. Times I. Now we get easier. Times I. 3 times I is 3I squared. 2 times I is just 2I. Whoa, what happened? Sorry about that. Ready? So on the bottom, what's I squared? -1. So what's 3 times -1? That's what's on the bottom. -3. And on top, 2i. And that's